The SA Health Product Regulatory Agency says that a new certification standard is now being enforced for companies that manufacture medical devices. In other words, the organization which regulates medical devices is now insisting that companies that want a license to sell these devices have to conform to a new standard. Oliver Naidu is the Managing Director of JC Auditors. They work in this space. Oliver, good afternoon to you, and thank you for your time. The new standard has actually got a name. It's called the ISO 13485. Is it very different to the previous standards in this area?
So, Stephen, previously there was no prerequisite for the issue of medical device licenses except for the SAHPRA requirements. Now SAHPRA have taken this decision to make the medical device ISO standard a prerequisite for the issue of medical devices for the primary purpose of ensuring the safety and efficacy of the standard in delivering ultimate or optimal patient care, and to ensure that patients or potential harm to patients is minimized. And this standard, in terms of the requirements, will hopefully deliver on that end.
So it's not just about whether a device is safe. It's also about whether the company that sells you the device can show you how to use it properly, or that the people who are going to use the device have been properly trained. Is that one of the reasons this is being brought in?
So the ISO standard applies to all players in the supply chain, which includes manufacturers and distributors as well. And it includes the requirement for there to be a medical device file which clearly indicates all the precautions, including end-user precautions that need to be taken in order for that device to work exactly as specified in terms of its performance requirements. And there are various different classes of medical devices, Stephen, ranging from Class A, which is low risk, things like a bandage, for example, all the way to Class D, which is high-risk devices that can have a defined impact on a patient, and this would typically include implantable devices such as a pacemaker or stents as well. So depending on the class of device and the risk level, different requirements and processes and rigorous testing is required to ensure that the product reaches the end user in the right condition and performs as required.
Okay, so I'm presuming this isn't really going to affect people who make bandages and sell bandages that much, but people who make stents or MRI machines might have a bit more paperwork that they need to manage.
Well, it does affect even the bandage manufacturers. That's defined as a Class A device. But of course, like you said, those who are doing in vitro testing devices or IVDs obviously have a role to play as well. So the standard can be contextualized and applied to any player within the medical device sector. But as you've mentioned, Class D, which is the higher risk devices, those manufacturing those devices would have a lot more stringent requirements to comply with. And even those doing calibration of machines also have a role to ensure that calibration of the equipment is done to ensure accurate results. So if you want to test a patient for a specific illness or use an equipment to treat a specific illness or diagnostics, then these equipments or machines should be maintained in the right way. And this is exactly what the ISO standard does promote in the various 8 clauses that currently it consists of.
Is this standard used in other countries too?
It's an international standard, Stephen, applicable globally. So it is proven to be an effective tool to ensure that medical devices are not just manufactured correctly, but during the supply chain up until it arrives at the patient, at the hospital bed, it is the integrity is maintained and the potential for harm is minimized.
I would presume that most companies in this space would be able to comply with this standard. Is that your expectation as well?
So there's quite a broad spectrum, Stephen. There are manufacturers, and we get some national or international companies in this space that are obviously having exceptional corporate governance and systems in place. But in our country, for example, around 45% are distributors. So these are typical trading or businesses that may not be adequately prepared for the ISO standard. So how does one ensure, doesn't matter how well the product is made, but when you are storing it, are the right storage conditions being applied? Is the sterility maintained? Certain products need to be stored in cold conditions. So we see that there is quite a gap between the manufacturer and going to the end user. And that is where I think a lot of work needs to happen in the next 12 months, I say, before the SAHPRA deadline would kick in, which is the 1st of January, 2025.
Oliver Naidu, thank you. Managing Director of JC Auditors. Really do appreciate the time.